You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and today, diving into the NFC North, we are ranking the offensive side of the football from 4 through 1. We'll break down each offense, kind of how I'm looking at them, what I expect their outlook is going to be as we go into the 2025 season. But I invite you all, as always, to comment down below. Let me hear from you all. We're talking Bears, Vikings, Packers, and of course the Detroit Lions. Let me hear from you. How would you organize these teams yourself offensively? Thoughts on my rankings, and of course things I may be missing. Fire away. Let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to discuss. I think there's a lot of intrigue with the way the NFC North looks this year, especially on the offensive side of the football with how much changing has gone around. And on top of that, just like things like, I don't know, maybe head coach Ben Johnson, formerly offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, a fellow division rival. Like, there's a lot of things going on and interestingly woven into what the NFC North is going to look like this year. So let me hear from y'all. But we'll start our way at the bottom and go up to the top, beginning at the number 4 spot. And Bears fans, I'm sorry, but I will basically come out and say off the top, this is really about just the unknown of everything that's going on in Chicago, but also just the strength of offenses in the NFC North as a whole. I am excited, first and foremost, about just about everything that Chicago has done this offseason. My one gripe was them just not being able to find a way to come away with a premier running back. And don't get me wrong, like DeAndre Swift, serviceable guy, 1,000-yard rusher just a couple of seasons ago in Philadelphia, just nearly missed 1,000 yards on the ground this past season. I think he can be serviceable for another season, but this offseason would have been basically perfect if you had found a way to get yourself a running back that wasn't all the way in the 7th round of this year's draft. But I mean, you look at the hiring of Ben Johnson, you bring in an offensive-minded head coach, somebody who is going to basically hold the hand of Caleb Williams as he develops in the NFL as the franchise quarterback in Chicago. You completely rework the interior of an offensive line that desperately needed help last season, to put things simply. And then, of course, the investment on the offensive side of the football during the draft, especially during the early portions, your top 3 of your top picks going to offensive players in this year's NFL draft. Like, I don't want to sit here and act like I don't see what Chicago's doing, or I don't want to come off like I'm not respecting what Chicago did this offseason, because I love what they did. Joe Thuney, all-pro, perennial all-pro at that, as far as what he does. Drew Dahlman coming in from Atlanta, I definitely think is an upgrade at center over what you had last year. I look at Jonah Jackson. He's the one guy that, like, I go, starting offensive lineman, but having only played in 4 games last season, what exactly are you going to get out of him? And then there's, of course, the left tackle situation right now. It sounds like Ozzie Trapillo is going to have every opportunity to potentially win himself a job at that spot against Braxton Jones, but definitely something you need to keep an eye on there. I love what they've done. I think they addressed basically every single need that they needed to address. And the ultimate question is, does it all work? There's no proof for me to go off other than just on paper, this should be a better offense than what it was last year. And I absolutely agree with that sentiment. But when you're in a division like the NFC North, where you have proven offense after proven offense after proven offense that you are going up against over the last, I would say, like 2 or 3 seasons, it's felt like, for all the other teams in the division, it's hard for me to sit here and go, yeah, Chicago made all the right moves. This is absolutely going to work. They could potentially be the best they're going to be the best offense in the NFC North. Like, it's hard for me to come to that conclusion. Do I say potentially? Absolutely. I definitely think there is a chance under Ben Johnson that he takes this offense to the moon. He could be the key that unlocks the pro potential of Caleb Williams and makes him what was essentially a number 1 draft pick last year for the Chicago Bears. Like, there is a very real possibility all of that happens and these moves all hit. There's also a possibility that maybe the offensive line doesn't mesh well. Ben Johnson is not cut out to be a head coach in the NFL, and Colston Loveland, who they drafted in the 1st round, ends up being a bust, and Luther Burden doesn't work out. Like, all those possibilities are there, and that goes for every other team in this division as well with some of the changes they've all made. But The Chicago Bears, as it currently stands, just has the most uncertainty and unknown. So I have them at number 4, but to be number 4 in the NFC North, I think is not as bad of a place to be as like being number 4 in a division like the AFC South. Like, you're in a really tough division with a stacked group of offenses that you're going up against into the 2025 season that at least have a little bit better proven track records that I just like overall a little bit more. So I'm excited for Chicago. Do not get me wrong. I think they made a ton of great moves. And I think they made a lot of the right moves as well, trying to fix this offense for Caleb Williams and under Ben Johnson now. It's just a matter of, do we actually get that? If we do, I think the sky is potentially the limit for what this offense could be, and we could be seeing what happened in Detroit over the last handful of seasons with Ben Johnson running things on the offensive side of the ball over there, happening in Chicago now instead. Looking at the number 3 team in this division here, and this was one where I love everything about this offense for the most part, but 2 things do have me a little bit concerned, and it's one of those things that I just could not push them past the number 3 spot because of, and that's going to be, of course, the Minnesota Vikings. Now, with the Vikings, here's what I have to say about this. Obviously, head coach Kevin O'Connell, one of the best in the game right now at what he does. He is able to put together a masterclass offense year in and year out. This is the 3rd season now where this offense is coming in with a brand new quarterback, and there's a very good possibility that with J.J. McCarthy now under center, the offense looks just as good as it did last year, just as good as it did the year before. There is clearly something going on with the way Kevin O'Connell handles things that is translating to extremely good quarterback play despite who's under center for them. That being said, how ready is J.J. McCarthy? That is the million-dollar question. He obviously missed the entirety of his rookie season due to a meniscus injury that had to be completely repaired, knocked him out for the entire rookie campaign. That could have been to his benefit. It's not like it was some devastating injury like a complete ACL tear and things like that. Like meniscus stuff you can typically get back to a lot quicker. So he was probably far more available to be able to do things throughout the entirety of the season than he would have been otherwise, being afforded the opportunity to just be on the sideline during those later games in the season, comfortably watching, learning from Kevin O'Connell, learning from Sam Darnold, whether it was the mistakes or the good things that he did there. Like, there's plenty of benefit that probably came away from his first season just sitting on the sideline, and also giving him the opportunity to not have to be rushed into a situation where maybe he wasn't ready to start. So, yeah, he could be completely fine, and that meniscus injury maybe ends up being more of a positive than a negative in hindsight. We'll find out, but obviously big question mark there. How does J.J. McCarthy look now in what'll end up being like his rookie season, essentially? I'm also curious about Christian Darrisaw and just how he's going to fare at the left tackle spot for the Minnesota Vikings. And honestly, there's a lot of question marks with the offensive line as a whole that I can get into in a second here. But Christian Darrisaw obviously injuring his ACL and MCL last season in week 8, missing the final 10 games of the season. So big question mark at the blind spot. Just how quickly does Christian Darrisaw bounce back? How fluid is he moving and everything? It's always, especially when it comes to offensive linemen, especially your premier left tackle, that is definitely something you'll have to keep an eye on. The interior of the O-line is also just something worth mentioning here. Of course, you go out, you bring in Will Fries, he himself coming off of a devastating injury last year as well from Indianapolis. You also brought in Ryan Kelly, another center from Indianapolis as well. Will Fries, I felt like was developing into a really good guy for the Colts over the last, 4 or so seasons that he was over there in Indy. It was just one of those things where coming off the injury, paying him the money that a team like the Minnesota Vikings did just did not make sense for Indianapolis, and I completely understand why. Ryan Kelly, on the other hand, good center. Do I think he gets you better play than Garrett Bradbury? Possibly. Definitely possibly. I will still say, though, that as somebody who watches the Indianapolis Colts a little bit more than other teams, having grown up rooting for them, I will say that Ryan Kelly is not quite what he was during the earlier portions of his season when he came in with Andrew Luck, so there is that as well. And then, Donovan Jackson, rookie on the offensive line, surrounded by just either guys that are coming off of injuries or just uncertainty as to what you're going to get. I don't love it, but I do think that Donovan Jackson will be a good long-term solution for this Vikings offensive line, so I do think it's a plus for the group altogether. And then the skill guys, I don't really have much to complain about. I love the skill options in Minnesota. I think you have some of the most talented guys from the running backs to the wide receiver room to your tight end room. Like, you have a phenomenal group of guys to work with. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. You're looking at two guys that, as a duo, are arguably one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL. And then, of course, TJ Hawkinson, unbelievable pass-catching tight end as well. He is one of the upper guys in the NFL. Aaron Jones, who just continues to look good despite creeping closer and closer to the wrong side of his age as a running back, still looks like a versatile weapon who can run with the football, catch out of the backfield. He does a great job in what the scheme calls for in Minnesota under Kevin O'Connell. So the biggest concerns for me really with this team are just, is the third time going to work out as far as plugging in a new quarterback? You go from Kirk Cousins to Sam Darnold to now J.J. McCarthy. This will be a really good case in point for Kevin O'Connell if it works out, being just an absolute offensive mastermind. Like, if this offense works and it runs the way it has the last couple of seasons with two other quarterbacks under center, we're going to really have to start having a conversation about just how good Kevin O'Connell actually is. And despite the fact that he gets all the praise that he does, he might be even better than we all realize, because this will have now been the third quarterback he's plugged into a system and found success with. So definitely something to keep an eye on with that. But injuries along the offensive line and just a lot of changing on the interior of it, plus what is going to essentially be a rookie quarterback for you who missed all of his first year in the NFL. Just a few question marks that keep me from pushing Minnesota higher than I wish that I could put them. Looking at the top two teams, though, Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers are what's left. And when I look at these two teams, I, again, always go back to, like, what team do I feel like I have more questions about than the other? Also, just like past production, things like that. Well, for the Detroit Lions, I settled on them at number 2, and it ultimately just comes down to Ben Johnson is no longer there. The mastermind behind the offense that has been unbelievable since Jared Goff stepped foot in Detroit as basically a castaway of LA in a trade of quarterbacks from Jared Goff leaving Los Angeles to go to Detroit, and of course sending Matthew Stafford to LA that ultimately led into LA winning a Super Bowl. Jared Goff has been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL since that moment happened. Somebody who was looked at as being cast off by his former team, a guy that just could not be a premier NFL level, or not a premier NFL level quarterback, but just like a guy that's going to bring you to a Super Bowl type back, even though he already, or type quarterback, even though he already did get you there. A lot of people didn't credit Jared Goff for that. You see the way he's been operating this offense in Detroit now for the last 3 years. He's a guy who's constantly in the conversation for NFL MVP, and the numbers speak for themselves, just how effective he is in what he is able to do. He does come with his flaws of high interception games and things like that, but ultimately love his game, love what he brings to the table here. You're loaded with talent offensively from the running back room with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery as arguably, and probably so, the best 1-2 punch running back combination in the NFL if you're looking at two guys as opposed to just a singular back. Then, of course, Sam Laporta emerging as one of the best tight ends in the NFL at a very young age. Your wide receiver room, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams. Tim Patrick is one of those guys that does not get quite the love he deserves because he's missed so much time with injury over the last few years, but somebody who is really effective himself when he's healthy and on the football field. And then, of course, not to mention one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Like, you look at the roster of this team as a whole, and you go, yeah, this is probably going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. The question just really is, does this offense go the way it has been, minus, of course, offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who is now the head coach of the aforementioned Chicago Bears? I don't know. I don't really have the answer to that, and I don't think anyone can truthfully sit here and say they do. Now, John Morton is going to be the guy that's taking over as offensive coordinator. Looking at some of his previous work in stints, he was just as recently working with Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos over there as, I believe, a passing game coordinator. He did have a loan opportunity with the New York Jets some years ago as an offensive coordinator for there, but that whole situation was not really great. The offense did not really do well. I don't really want to put too much of that on John Morton because that roster was not great. Like, you had like an aging 32-year-old Matt Forte on that offense that year. Bilal Powell was the other running back. Like, that was not a great group of guys to even be working with and get your first opportunity. And so the real question is just like, how does John Morton do? I don't know, and I don't have the answer to that. But talent can cover up some of that as far as uncertainty goes, whether this person is the right guy for the offensive coordinator job. When you have as much talent as you possibly have in Detroit on the football field, I think it could mask a vast majority of whether he's the right answer or not. Maybe not all of it, especially when it comes to like situational play calling. I think that's what's going to be ultimately key to this offense here. But I mean, aside from that, there's not really much negative I have to say about the Detroit Lions offense as a whole. I think it's going to be another really good year for them. Maybe it's not quite to the levels that we saw it over the last couple of seasons, but I still think it's going to be a really good unit, unless John Morton is just hitting the wrong buttons on the wrong situations and play calling is just drastically different than what we were used to from the last few years with Ben Johnson there. But overall, I like what the Lions bring to the table, and I expect them to be, once again, another really efficient offense. And then last, of course, but certainly not least, at the number 1 spot, the Green Bay Packers. The way I look at this, the Green Bay Packers season in 2025 is basically a culmination of what they have been working towards over the last 4 years now of Jordan Love's time in Green Bay. You bring him in, he sits on the bench for a couple of years. Ultimately, in year 3 of his career, he gets the starting job, impresses everyone, 32 touchdowns, earns himself a contract extension off that one season. He looked pretty good last year as well. Maybe a slight step back, injury, obviously a little bit of an issue during that early portion of the season. But ultimately, this is an offense that at this point in time, especially with the investment you got this offseason, this should be the best version of the offense that we've seen from Green Bay with Jordan Love under center. You have one of the deepest wide receiver rooms in the NFL, if not the deepest, when you look at Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, who just has a really hard time staying healthy, but when he's on the field and healthy, can be a really effective wide receiver. Then, of course, you go in the first round for the first time in ages, drafting yourself a wide receiver in the first round in Matthew Golden. You go double dip in the wide receiver room in the third round as well with Savion Williams. Offensive line's in a pretty good spot. Left tackle is something you'll definitely have to keep an eye on. I think second-round pick Anthony Belton could be battling for that left tackle spot with Rasheed Walker, because I don't know if Walker is the answer there. And then, of course, your running back room led first and foremost by Josh Jacobs, who's coming off what is probably like his second best season in his career, I guess you should say, besides that one phenomenal season he had with Las Vegas. I mean, 1,600 total yards from scrimmage, 16 total touchdowns is a career best for him, the yardage being second best in his career. This is the culmination here. You have your head coach, offensive guru himself in Matt LaFleur. You have your quarterback. You have a litany of skill talent. You finally went and got the wide receiver one that Green Bay Packers fans have desperately been banging the table for in the very first round of this past NFL draft. Very fitting that it happened while the draft was in Green Bay. You don't really have excuses. That's kind of how I look at Green Bay right now, and that's kind of where I'm projecting them to go at this point. You don't really have an excuse. Jordan Love has shown he can be a really good quarterback in this league. If he has a healthy year, nothing, I feel like the start to last year really hampered what this Green Bay Packers team could have been offensively. It was just not a great way to kick things off for the season, and that bump in the road was just a lot to deal with early on. I think full healthy season, he's protected well along the offensive line. He has a litany of talent to work with throwing the football. You look at like tight end Tucker Kraft, if he can maybe take another step forward. He had a pretty good season himself last year, 700 yards, 7 touchdowns. Like, this is an offense that should absolutely be able to go and should be able to go with the best of them next year. Coupled with a defense that took steps in the right direction, I think that defense will continue to get better in the second year. So I think it's going to ultimately help the offense out in giving them better opportunities, better field position, things like that. Obviously, defense always helping the offense the better that it is. So there's that to account for as well, putting them in good positions. But I like what this Packers team has put together here, especially on paper, but ultimately just what we've seen from them over the last few years, I think has been really good. And the injury thing is what really, I think, just kind of set off a bad taste at the start of last season. And without that, I think we're looking at an even better offense last year. So double down on that with the additions they've made this year. Just about everything stays the same. There's not really a ton of changes from this unit. It looks like just on paper they got better. And I think we're going to have ourselves a really good offense coming out of Green Bay, and I'm really looking forward to see it. I look at the NFC North, and this is one of the most complicated divisions offensively to rank 4-1. I could sit here and absolutely say that I'm very much there's a very good chance I get this grouping wrong, because like I said, if Kevin O'Connell can make it work with J.J. McCarthy, that offense could fly over there in Minnesota and they could wind up being the top offense again. And Detroit, if they don't skip a beat minus Ben Johnson, they could be the best. Obviously, Ben Johnson could take Chicago from the worst offense in the division last year to the very best if it really is his system that made things go in Detroit. So there's so many variables that changed on this entire division. And again, I could be very much wrong here, but as it stands with the way things look right now, my reservations about certain things and others that I'm excited to see, This is how I look at it. So let me know in the comment section down below. Thoughts, opinions on the rankings. How would you rank them? Agreements, disagreements, fire away. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.